In the late 1970s, deep in the mountains of South America, life moved at a different pace. In the markets of small towns, bright fabrics fluttered in the wind, children played barefoot in dusty streets, and the Andes stood like ancient sentinels under a cloudless sky. But beneath the warmth and color was a quiet terror, a whisper that moved from village to village. Young girls were disappearing. Some vanished on their way to school, others from crowded markets in broad daylight. Families searched the rivers, the hillsides, the winding mountain roads, and found nothing. In places where superstition was strong, some believed it was the work of spirits. Others thought it was human trafficking or the violence of guerrilla fighters. But the truth was stranger and far darker. One man was hunting them, and his name was Pedro Alonso López. Pedro was born in 1948 in Tolima, Colombia, a place already scarred by violence. His father, a petty criminal, was killed in a gang shootout before Pedro was even born. His mother worked as a prostitute, and the house was filled with strangers. By the time he was 8 years old, she'd thrown him out onto the street for stealing. Pedro would later claim that this was the moment the world turned its back on him, and he began to hate it in return. Alone and hungry, he joined the countless street children in Bogotá, living under bridges, in abandoned buildings, scavenging for food. The city was brutal to the weak. He was beaten, assaulted, and in his words, taught what evil truly was. Those years hardened him. He survived by stealing and running scams, but there was something else festering inside him, an anger that was looking for an outlet. By his teens, Pedro had been arrested multiple times for theft and carjacking. At 18, he was caught stealing a car and sent to prison. There, he claimed he was brutally attacked by other inmates. When he got out, he didn't just leave prison with a criminal record. He left with a vow to take revenge on the world. And in his twisted mind, that revenge would be taken on the most innocent victims he could find. In the 1970s, Pedro drifted across South America, through Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. He moved like a shadow, traveling by bus, sometimes on foot, taking odd jobs, or living off petty theft. And wherever he went, little girls began to vanish. His method was always the same. He'd visit crowded markets, watch the children playing or helping their mothers sell food, and pick his target. Sometimes he offered them small gifts or promised to take them to a place with toys. Other times, he simply waited until they were alone. He would lead them to an isolated spot, the banks of a river, the edge of a field, the slopes of a quiet hill. And there, the nightmare began. Pedro would later admit to strangling his victims, not quickly, but slowly, claiming he liked to see the light go out of their eyes. When the child was dead, he would sometimes bury her, other times leave the body where it fell. In some cases, he buried multiple victims together in shallow graves. To Pedro, these killings were not just acts of violence, they were trophies, proof of his power over life and death. At first, no one connected the disappearances. These were poor, rural areas. Local police often assumed the girls had run away, been taken by relatives, or fallen victim to trafficking rings. There were no alerts, no investigations that crossed regional borders. Pedro was invisible, and he was getting bolder. By the mid-1970s, the disappearances had become a wave. In Ecuador alone, dozens of young girls went missing in a matter of months. Pedro moved fast, striking in one town, and then vanishing before the alarm could be raised. Later, he would claim he sometimes killed 2 or 3 children in a single week. The death toll was rising into the hundreds. Then, In 1978, his killing spree almost came to an end, not by the police, but by a group of indigenous villagers in Peru. They caught Pedro in the act of trying to abduct a 9-year-old girl. He was tied up, beaten, and the villagers prepared to execute him. But before they could, a missionary living in the area intervened, convincing them to hand Pedro over to the police. And the police let him go. With no concrete evidence, they released him. Pedro vanished again, and the murders resumed. It wasn't until 1980 in the city of Ambato, Ecuador, that fate finally caught up with him. A flash flood had uncovered a mass grave, the remains of 4 young girls buried together. The police began questioning vendors in the local market, and several said they had seen a strange man talking to children. One vendor recognized the description instantly. She had seen him trying to lure her own daughter away just days before. The man was Pedro Alonso López. For weeks, police escorted Pedro into remote fields, riverbanks, and hillsides. Everywhere he pointed, they found graves. Small, shallow mounds of earth, remnants of children's clothing, bones scattered by animals. In one chilling moment, a detective recalled Pedro standing over a grave and saying calmly, "She's still beautiful, even now." The media called him El Monstruo de los Andes, the monster of the Andes, and the name stuck. In court, he was calm, sometimes even cheerful, describing the murders in detail. He said he chose girls because they were pure, and that killing them gave him peace. He showed no remorse. When asked why he killed so many, he simply said, "I am the man of the century." In 1981, Pedro was convicted of 110 murders in Ecuador, the maximum the court could prove. But Ecuador's legal system at the time had no death penalty. It didn't even allow life sentences. The maximum punishment was 16 years. And so, one of the deadliest serial killers in history was sentenced to just over a decade and a half behind bars. Pedro served his time quietly. He read, he exercised, he talked to almost no one. And then, in 1994, he walked out of prison a free man. Ecuador deported him to Colombia, where he was briefly rearrested on old charges, and then released again. After that, Pedro Alonso López disappeared. Some say he was last seen in 2002, wanted for another girl's disappearance in Colombia. Others believe he changed his name and lives quietly somewhere in the Andes, an old man hiding in plain sight. Officially, his whereabouts are unknown, and if he is still alive, he would be in his late 70s. For the families who lost daughters to the monster of the Andes, the wounds never closed. Markets that once rang with the laughter of children now carry a shadow. Even today, in some towns, parents will not let their children walk to school alone, because they remember the time when a smiling stranger could take a child by the hand, and they would never be seen again. Pedro Alonso López remains a chilling reminder of 2 things: that evil can move unnoticed across borders, and that sometimes the law is powerless to stop it. He didn't wear a mask. He didn't hide in the dark. He walked among crowds in daylight with the patience of a predator who knew no one was watching. And maybe, just maybe, he still does. If this story gripped you, subscribe to the channel. There are more haunting, untold true crime cases coming soon. Darker, deeper, and more disturbing than ever before.